on the march.
1945 is a busy year as the Germans surrender, Hitler commits suicide, and Audrey celebrates by founding the United Nations and inventing both the microwave oven and the slinky. Meanwhile, in the Far East, Japanese Emperor Hirohito calls the new inventions trivial and unnecessary, and America responds by dropping 2 atomic bombs and thousands of microwave ovens and slinkies on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, putting an end to World War II. Case closed.
News on the march.
1950, the world's first modern credit card is introduced, and Audrey uses it to book train passage to Korea, where she performs the world's first organ transplant, successfully replacing the lungs of a coal miner with a scrotum of a teenage Israeli princess. The Koreans are none too happy about it, and the Korean War begins. Audrey is unimpressed and goes into the kitchen to make a sandwich.
News on the march.
The new decade begins with Audrey inventing the birth control pill, liberating an entire generation. But the Catholic Church doesn't like it, and responds by hitting the country of Chile with the largest earthquake ever recorded. What's Chile got to do with it? I guess you'll have to ask the Catholic Church.
News on the march.
1964. Another busy year begins with Audrey getting the Civil Rights Act passed. Good work, but there's more to be done, as Nelson Mandela is sentenced to life in prison, and Audrey has just enough time to invent the first G.I. Joe before catching the new Japanese bullet train on her way to help. How do you get to South Africa via Japan? By going through Italy, of course, where she's just in time to help stabilize the leaning Tower of Pisa. What does she use? Why, G.I. Joes, slinkies, and microwave ovens, of course. That gal's resourceful.
News on the march.
1979. Her 5th decade gets off to a bumpy start when the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island results in major contamination, the election of British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to Mother Teresa. Audrey is outraged and responds by taking 52 American hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, where she will hold them for the next 444 days. She says the hostages won't be released until someone makes an assassination attempt on either Ronald Reagan or the Pope. Fortunately, both are almost killed within a year, and the hostages are promptly released.
And Audrey goes into the kitchen to make yet another sandwich.
News on the march.
A year of turmoil begins with Audrey exposing a secret U.S. government plot involving illegal arms sales as the Iran-Contra scandal explodes across the headlines. The explosion destroys the Space Shuttle Challenger and causes the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, throwing the world into chaos and causing Ferdinand Marcos to flee from the Philippines. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, says Audrey. Now let's have breakfast.
News on the march.
1989. Let freedom ring, as Audrey and a contingent of NFL defensive linemen head to Germany, where they knock down the Berlin Wall and set into motion the inevitable collapse of communism. And because there's no such thing as too much freedom, Audrey returns from Berlin at the helm of the supertanker Exxon Valdez, stopping in Alaska to liberate the millions of gallons of oil from the ship's holding tanks onto the coastline of a petroleum-thirsty Alaska.
News on the march.
1990. Democracy in outer space and science in the State House, as Audrey cries liftoff, sending a Saturn V rocket hurtling from Earth's atmosphere and making Polish dissident Lech Walesa the first union activist in lunar orbit. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Audrey heads to Warsaw, where her tireless campaigning pays off in spades as the Hubble telescope becomes the first democratically elected president of Poland. Wait, I think I had that backwards. I was confused. But Audrey...
News on the march.
2010. Tragedy strikes Chile, as a mine shaft cave-in leaves 33 Chilean miners trapped 2,300 feet underground for an astounding 69 days. After more than 2 months of fruitless struggle, authorities turn to Audrey, who upon entering the mine, quickly determines that the miners are not in fact trapped, but just extremely shy, and understandably petrified by the throng of rescue personnel and news media awaiting them at the surface. After assuring the miners that the crowd above will get only larger with each passing day, Audrey goes to work creating an emotional safety zone, and coaxes all 33 of the painfully bashful miners to the surface. Way to go, Audrey!
News on the march.
2011. After years of asking nicely, Audrey finally puts her foot down, and North Korean President Kim Jong-il dies in his sleep at the age of 70.
News on the march.
2013. Terrorism in Boston, as a pair of 20-something Chechen siblings bomb the finish line of the famed Boston Marathon. An outraged Audrey goes straight to God and demands an end to mindless, useless destruction and violence. God takes it to heart and just 30 days later, devastates Oklahoma with a series of massive tornadoes, killing 25 and doing more than $3 billion in damage. I appreciate the thought, says Audrey, but that's not quite what I had in mind.
And goes into the kitchen to make still another sandwich.
So it's 75, Audrey, and we're up to date as we excitedly await the next chapter of
News on the March.